Subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to get all the latest updates. During this period of the lockdown, the one thing that we have not had to worry about is cash in our banks and in our ATMs. This was something that the government was extremely mindful of, which is why bank staff has, of course, continued to work. But what about those who have to look after the movement of cash to make sure that when you go and you swipe your card and you go to the ATM to withdraw cash, that cash is there safely and securely? How is this happening? This is also a critical essential service at the front line of the battle against the coronavirus. To talk about this, we're joined from Chennai by Colonel David Devasahayam, who of course leads the Radiant Cash Management Services among many other companies that he promotes. Colonel David, pleasure talking to you. Give us a sense, because I think a lot of people have no idea about the fact that it actually takes a lot of effort to make the movement of cash safe and secure.
Well, thank you, Barkha, for reaching out to me in Chennai. And in a group of companies, one of the large companies is the Radiant Cash Management Services, which is a cash logistics company. Now, just as in a body, you need a lot of the blood circulation to be, completely foolproof. Similarly, in a country, you need the circulation of cash to be consistent, trustworthy, and dependable at all times. And I like to explain to you as to what exactly the cash cycle is, so that people understand as to what it is. Once the currency has got to be moved from the currency chest of the RBI to the currency chest of the forward banks. They can be multinational banks, they can be privatized banks, or they can be nationalized banks, which are large banks. So once the cash reaches them, from there it has got to be forwarded again or sent forward to the forward branches. So that over the counter or through cash logistics companies, if it is loaded into ATMs, the body public can then access the cash based on their cash requirement. So now once the cash is with them and they spend it at various outlets, it can be railway stations, it could be a mobile outlet, it can be a petrol bunk, it can be a finance company, it can be an e-commerce outlet.
Right.
Wherever cash is spent, now the cash has again reached a different segment. And there is a need to again collect it, sort it out in vaults, secure vaults, and bundle it up and then return it back to the bank so that they can again be recirculated as and when required. So this is a constant cycle. And this cycle does not understand an emergency like the COVID virus, because the people need the cash, it has got to be readily available.
Yeah.
We are a few cash logistics companies. All told, I think all our manpower together would be about 55,000 people. So of which we are one of the larger companies and with a pan-India footprint. So we provide this essential service even during the lockdown.
So give us a sense of how many times a day would your vans, actually have to go out, or could it be depending on when the client needs to move it? Because it could be the banks moving it could be companies moving it could be anybody moving it, even at a time like this. So how many times, is there a movement, let's say, of this cash from point A to point B? And how many people does it take to secure one movement?
The movement has definitely come down during the lockdown because many of the establishments have down their shutters. And once we load the ATM, even the body public, is not coming out in the numbers that they used to. So there is definitely a reduction in the movement as such. But as far as the men are concerned, even at say 1 or 2 movements per day, they are taking the risk. They have to move out. They are aware of the infection which is there in the air. And despite them that they move out, they take the requisite precautions, just like health workers, and they carry out their services.
Yeah. And, you, of course, come from an army background. You're a retired colonel. You commanded a unit before you moved into the private sector of the Assam Rifles. Are many of the men and women as well now working in this particular space formally of the military?
Yes, we have 2 segments to it. One is the operational segment. The operational segment, because of my own comfort level, is largely led by ex-servicemen at various levels. And then the other aspect is that of the banking service, which has to be provided, which involves data management and reconciliation. So that essentially has to be led by bankers. So those are former bankers. So both are high on integrity, good people to work with.
So can you give us a sense, because as you said, to keep the money flow going, even at a time like this, the men and women who are looking after this are no less than other frontline warriors. What are some of the challenges that they face on the ground during something like the lockdown?
The first challenge, which obviously all my men and women face, is leaving their families and the secure environments of their homes and moving out. So we have had a bit of absenteeism, but it's nothing much to write home about. It's a small amount of absenteeism, which is understandable. And thereafter, once they come, we have provided them with all the requisite precautions, which is like face masks. They have surgical gloves for handling cash. And then we try to insist as much as on physical and social distancing as possible. And hand sanitization, periodic sanitization is insisted on. So now that the lockdown has been there for the last 19 days, now they've a kind of culture habit forming has happened. And I'm happy to see that the men and women are really adhering to it. And then we also insist that habitually they should go back home, first have a proper bath, have some kind of this kind of decontamination, and then meet their family members. And as of now, so far we've been lucky; we haven't had a single case so far.
You haven't had a single case, and thank God for that. Touch wood. One last question. We live in an increasingly digitized economy, and during the lockdown, I would imagine that there could be two kinds of reaction. One is to continue to use more plastic for classes like ours who can afford it, but there are also many people who simply can't afford it. And then there's a third category who could afford it but still feel like they need cash at home for an emergency. So how is this impacted in the sense of space you're in? When you see an emergency like the lockdown, do you find people gravitating back to the need to have cash, or has the digitization of the economy changed a lot of that?
Most of the families, prior going into the lockdown, from what we understand, have drawn, fairly sizable amounts of cash, so that they have it available for paying it, because most of though the e-commerce establishments are functional, but there again you have the issues of absenteeism and the workforce not really being available in the numbers that's required. So they have to be dependent on the corner shops which are there and the retail outlets, or they have to fill up gas. So we are not seeing any large-scale reduction. There is a reduction, but that's because the body public itself, by and large, is coming out in much smaller numbers.
But it strikes me as I'm talking to you that in keeping the cash secure, that movement cannot allow for much social distancing. So how do you ensure social distancing among those who are guarding and protecting the security of that cash?
Social distancing is with regards to, like now they are going into an ATM. First, they have to carry out a sanitization of the entire machine. And then they maintain a distance. Suppose there's a guard at that location, then they maintain a distance. Similarly, at a bank, the cash is kept separately. It's under CCTV. So these men who got together and who are moving, obviously between them, that kind of distancing is not possible. But they are checked, with thermometers initially, whether there's any fever or things like that. Otherwise, those 2 or 3 men who are working together as a team, they would be close to each other, but then their faces are covered by masks. As well as for handling the cash, we provide them with surgical gloves. So in that manner, we try to maintain as much within the norms. The risk of health is much higher. Yes. But here it is definitely at a lower level, but we try to mitigate that risk.
I was just going to say that we so kind of robotically go and withdraw our cash from our machines without even knowing how much goes into it. Colonel David, thank you. It's unsung heroes of the frontline, as it were, a different kind of frontline modern warfare against this virus. Pleasure talking to you, Colonel David.
Thank you, Barkha. We normally, as by nature, we remain very low profile because the nature of business is such
Yes.
But personally, as one of the industry heads, I was extremely proud of my men and women, the way they have responded to this requirement. And therefore, thank you for having called me and given me an opportunity to share this with the country.
Thank you, and may they remain safe. Thank you very much.